quickly. That back enough like that, we should be able to slip that out.
I'd say it's probably a good thing we're actually removing these again, because I reuse these gaskets, but I actually do have Frenchie's Performance Garage brake booster and clutch booster gasket kit, so we'll fit this up this time. So Frenchie's Performance Garage do a lot of OEM replacement stuff, like the Attessa switch replacement that we did, and he also does these really good gaskets. So that's a gasket for clutch booster and brake booster. I've also got the ones for the top of the coil. So this is the Nissan S15 clutch master cylinder, and that's the R32 GTR clutch master cylinder. This one's vacuum assisted, as you can see from the spring, and this is where the booster goes. So this essentially is full of pressure. That there will actually be full of air, and it assists in the pushing of the clutch pedal. I actually like it because it gives a really soft clutch, but Anthony from Darts Home has insisted that this actually gives a better feel. So yeah, I've actually swapped out the bolts that come with it for the gold anodized ones we had done, all the zinc plating ones we had done. Just looks a little bit fancier. Push.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Oh yeah, start her up. One's 16, one's 12. Just putting the bolts in for the drive shaft. Now, I can't explain this enough, that whenever you're doing rotating parts like drive shaft or tail shaft, always use Loctite and always use good spring washers and the proper bolts. So if you're going to replace these bolts, which I really don't need to, you don't see them, make sure you use proper genuine Nissan ones. Think about how much torque this thing's going to produce through all four wheels with big tyres, big heavy brakes, a lot of rotational force. Had an absolute red hot crack here today and managed to get the motor up in place. I've got the subframe lowered, the spaces are in, and look, it fits really well. I'm kind of glad that the hot side didn't turn up, because I would have bolted the hot side on and then put it up in. But with the manifold and the HKS turbo, there was no way. I don't think it was going to fit. I think it would have been too much of a squeeze, so I'm going to bolt the hot side up while it's in there. There's plenty of room, especially just since we're doing a single. It definitely is bigger, and you can tell. I'll have to get the engine brace out shortly and just see how close it goes across the top here. I didn't realise that's it would look so big. I'll get used to it and it'll change. I don't think any of this looks big, and the size of the motor doesn't look big. It just looks bigger because this bit's sitting higher. Like visually, this is now in your face where it was quite low before. And that's probably going to be the biggest drama. The only place it hits is this RB26 cover. I'm definitely not cutting this bonnet. There is no way I will cut that. I'm saying it now like you think I'm going to change my mind, but this is an original GTR bonnet. I'm not going to cut it. We've already talked. We're going to get a carbon fibre or fiberglass bonnet. I'm not going to do that. It will have to change. The only other thing we can do is to fix it is to remove the front timing cover and just run it like, have I got the shirt on? And it will literally look like that. So that is a good option, because that motor does look good on the shirt, so we can always remove that. I don't want to change the valve covers. I think the RB26 valve covers are too unique to the RB26, and at the end of the day, that's what it still is. No other clearance issues. I just can't get over the way it looks at the moment. It looks absolutely incredible, especially down under there where you can see the side of the block, and again on the other side it looks cool. So yeah, what else? What do we got to do now? I'm going to keep working on it. The hot side will turn up possibly tomorrow, if not the next day, so we'll get stuck into that. There you go, guys. Pretty incredible to see it in the car. Get the windscreens and that in maybe next week, and we can start on the interior. We'll get that clutch up in and home straight. G'day everyone, welcome back to Nori Factory. Thank you for watching another episode on the R32 GTR build. In the side of the block here, we've got a -10 O-ring to -10, which will go there. So all the heater hoses are going to be in -10 size. I think that's a good size. And then we'll get where the heater hoses come out, just see the two there and there. Where they come out, we'll swing them around with rubber then to a barb, which will swap it over to an AN fitting, so just -10. Righto, so I'm actually going to run a solid heater line, so just this short little solid one back to there. It's nice and strong. It's up out of the way of the throttle body here, and then just to there, and then so that'll be a heater hose, that'll be a heater hose. Simple, nice and done. So what I need to do now is we've got our Barnes oil pump on the front, which is supplying an awesome amount of oil. So it's got a pickup obviously in the bottom of the sump there, which goes straight into the bottom of the pump. Now we've got a -12 supply coming out of here, and it will go to one of those ones there. So we need to make a nice oil supply line, -12 up to there. Raceworks offer this ripper fitting here, a male -12 that end to a female -12 swivel with a 1/8 MPT port for a sensor. So that'll go either on the side of the block or straight out of the oil pump, and that'll give us oil pressure sensor. I'm going to have probably 2 or 3 oil pressure sensors over this engine. I'll have one coming from the pump, I have one at the block, and then one at the turbo as well. Brand new dipstick tube with a bit of Worth bearing retainer on it. It's got to go down in the dipstick hole. I push them down in and let them set overnight before I put the dipstick actually back in it, and I'll show you when it's finished.
Approximately 10 hours later.
I do have some parts that have arrived today. I've got some more Raceworks fittings there to go through, which will that there will finish everything off around the motor. So I've put a 1/8 MPT fitting in the front here for some coolant pressure and temp off the front of that one. I'll leave the switch and a temp there for the factory gauge in the car, and we'll run this one here back down to a sensor block on the side of the engine or the side of the bay somewhere, which will also have our oil pressure out of the pump and also oil pressure going into the engine block. So one in the coolant system, two in the oil system, one in the fuel system. Then we'll have turbo back pressure, and then we'll also have like a manifold pressure. So we'll probably have a few sensors for that. But we need to get this ready to go up into the car, which we'll do over the weekend. So this afternoon, I would like to get the OS Gaiken 4-plate clutch bolted up. We'll get the gearbox on and bolted up. We'll look at the transmission cross member. So I've actually ordered a Tomei cross member for the Hollinger. That has arrived from Kudos Motorsport. We need to unbox that and get to it. We've got the Franklin Performance clutch booster delete. Anthony has said get rid of it. It causes far too many issues, and just to run an S15 clutch master cylinder. So I've got the Franklin Performance spacer and a Nissan S15 clutch master cylinder to go up in. So we'll put that up in before we put the engine up in. This is a Tomei cross member for the Hollinger 6-speed sequential. That bolts straight up. So your gearbox is now hard mounted. It just relies on the engine mounts for a bit of flex. This is our Franklin Performance clutch booster delete kit. So that bracket just spaces the the clutch slave cylinder out enough to fit on, and it also changes it from bolting in that way to the S15 slave cylinder bolting straight up. This is an S15 master cylinder. Because you're taking away the booster for the clutch assist, you can't use a standard 32 Skyline slave cylinder, master cylinder. You could use it, but you're going to have a really heavy pedal. That's our coolant switch for the light on the dash. Okay, so I've had the this is the vacuum rail, which used to have the long pipes coming off the end. So we've now got a 1/8 MPT bung welded in there, and then we've got a 1/4 MPT bung welded in there. So this one will go to the brake booster. This one will be a really good manifold pressure source for sensors and gauges and things like that. I have been waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for this, but it's time to put the Raceworks RB26 high performance fuel rail on. Pretty pumped on it. We will probably have fuel entering from the rear. We'll have the return line coming from the front, and that'll actually have the fuel pressure reg, which is mounted on the side of the engine underneath the intake plenum, hidden away. And then this time we're running a fuel pulsation dampener. The fuel dampener actually comes apart, so it comes with the lid on it, which you undo, and then you have to put the pulsation valve, or the dampener I guess you call it, actually inside. Okay, so you set your little O-ring on the dampener, and then you drop it straight down in so it seals on the O-ring into the housing, just like that. That'll sit down in there, and then you just put your cover back on and do your bolts up. Now you have to get your feeler gauge out for the next bit. Screw these in, you screw the pulsation dampener itself down in. These don't close up completely, it closes down to a 0.8 gap. So use the old trusty blue Loctite. I didn't put it on the bolts, I actually dropped it in the hole itself because I didn't want the Loctite getting everywhere. So I'm going to wind that down right now. Going to use the feeler gauge to check the gap and wind it down to 0.8 of a mil. Okay, while the engine's still all out and I've got the fuel rail up in, just sort of test fit. I wasn't that keen on it when I first started looking at this big black fuel rail, but I actually really like it, and the fuel dampener also looks cool. Now, while this big bad girl is out, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run a bit of vacuum line stuff. So I'm going to set up the fuel pressure reg, which runs off this little nipple here off the vacuum line, goes down in between behind the timing cover. So we need to put a bit of heat sheathing on it. So this hose will go straight on the end there, and then it'll run to the fuel pressure reg, which will be underneath. I am thinking about hiding this underneath as well, but we'll see how we go. but I'm going to run my trigger wiring, this here, through the timing cover and actually down in behind here. But to keep it away from the timing belt, I'm actually going to drill a hole in between this eye here and the bracket, in the bracket and the panel, like your timing cover back panel, and then I'll poke it down through there and then run it out the back here, and it should keep that wiring away from the timing belt as it runs around. Put a little grommet in there just so the wiring won't chafe on that. Always do that. That actually worked quite well, so that goes through there now. It'll go through the case. Actually, that's annoying. I'll have to poke it back through the case to make it work. And then I'll have to put a 3-pin Deutz plug, DTM one, little one on the end of this, sitting about there. That looks pretty sick. So this time I've actually fitted the black backing plate. Looks heaps better. So the way I did it is I sat it in there without doing these up first, then let that sort of centralize itself, and then I did it up, and I am super stoked with that. As I've said, not always a big fan of these guys, but you can't go past their trigger hit. Time to lift her up. So we're gonna lift it up with the forklift, get a trolley and just sit underneath it, and then we'll, while that's sitting on the trolley, we'll then get the Hollinger and slide it up to it and put it on. But there's a few bits and pieces I'm missing, which I'm not happy about. But I don't have a pilot bearing for there. I don't have the thermostat housing or the Nismo thermostat, but I'll get another one. It's a Nismo cold thermostat. And I didn't put the lifting lugs back on it because I thought I wouldn't need them, and now I need them, so I'm looking for them. But that's what we're doing right now.